Alright guys, so welcome to my channel. This content today, or rather let me introduce myself. Hey, my name is Lamaya. The content today is a re-upload, and I wanted to share this content again because one, there's some substantial value to what I was saying, or rather within this commentary, and two, this content will aid for future content that I'll make. I do have a couple of story times that I want to base on the relationship that I was discussing very vaguely within this commentary. So nonetheless, I wanted to just come on here and explain myself because I know I have a way of speaking politically correct in a way that voids my audience of unnecessary transparency. So essentially, I was just discussing a moment within my life. Excuse me, I need some water. I was discussing a moment within my life where I was experiencing depression, and I had friends that were unsupportive of me during that time. They really voided the lack of, well, not voided the lack of, they really voided me any empathy and or sympathy during this time in the way that I would bestow into them. So long story short, I was just discussing how, people know when the vibe changes. People can't act like they don't see a difference in a person. And then when that person finally asserts that there is in fact a difference, they act as if like, oh, like I would have never known. It's your fault that you didn't tell me. Like it's your fault. Like, don't get me wrong. I can take accountability for being depressed and not letting you know that, hey, I was in fact depressed. But even for me, anybody that has ever experienced depression, it's not this singular occurrence, and it's not something that happens the same way every time for all people. So sometimes even for me, it's a surprise, like, oh, damn, bitch, like, oh, shit, you are depressed. But you have to go through that moment of reclusion, reflection, and refining. That is my mantra. That is my motto. If anybody ever comes on YouTube or any social media platform talking about it, they got it from me, you thief. But anyways, like for me, it's just like anxiety, OCD, ADHD. These are issues that are, what is it? Is it neurological or, it pertains to an organ within our body. And sometimes because it is a mental illness, we don't perceive it as being in fact an illness, rather something that is of self-control. And to a degree, there is a level of control that you must have when navigating these mental illnesses, shall we say. Like depression is all about your perspective, as to some people may have to seek psychiatric assistance. But nonetheless, like essentially it was just like, child, you act like you can be empathetic or sympathetic, like, dang girl, like I get it, you was getting a little distant, I'm sorry. You were depressed, my bad, you know what I mean? But instead of like assuming accountability for their role within how they dealt with me, they were just like, okay, fuck you, bitch, like you should have said something, you should have did this, you should have did that, you should have. I'm like, whoa, wait a second, but what about you? It's not that I want them to be accountable for my emotions, no, but be accountable for how you respond to a person during emotional distress, you know what I mean? And don't get me wrong, like I won't hold them absolutely accountable because they didn't know what I was going through fully. But to a degree, when the vibe changes, you know what I mean? And that's what I wanted to discuss in this commentary. People act like they don't know when girl, my alarm. That's what I wanted to discuss in this commentary. People act as if they do not know when a vibe changes, when a person changes. But in this commentary, I'll explain further as to my perception of a changed vibe and how, responses can be yielded, to say the least. But yeah, I'm done rambling. I'm sorry. I love you. I like you. I like you. That's what Ashna Shara said. If that's how you say her name, child. That's what Reagan Gilmore said, okay? As we merge in proximity and progress within chosen and or given connections, we are sharing and emitting energy. We sense energy. We become attuned to various emotional vibrational frequencies. We know the vibes. Our energies carry a distinguished frequency and vibration for the various emotional states we navigate and encounter. The energy may not be confirmed as perceived, yet it has been detected as whatever it is perceived to be. If one claims oblivion within obvious situational circumstances and spares no emotional parlance for a perceived transgression, then they truly lack the sympathy and, most importantly, the empathy to align consciousness for absolute understanding. They have willfully chosen to disregard the evident truth for evaded accountability. If there is a friend, if there is a significant other within your life that is either deeply saddened, deeply enraged, depressed, whatever the case may be, if they are feeling their emotions deeply, and you notice that there is a shift within that person because there is a shift within that relationship, yet you have chosen to isolate understanding for what has not been spoken, you are choosing not to understand the situational circumstance. There have been relationships that I was a part of where, because verbal communication was not being expressed, the nonverbal communication was being disregarded. And I just found that to be quite idiotic. There are so many people in life and in relationships that will act as if they did not know someone was going through something or something was going to happen. But if you look at the context clues, if you look at nonverbal communication, you will easily be able to assess the circumstance of that situation. You may not reach a resolve, but you will definitely reach a conclusion. You will definitely gain understanding and insight when you seek nonverbal communication in the way that you seek verbal communication. What is visible can be the most obvious because it is the most accounted. When routines collapse, when order is lost, when time is shortened, when gestures receive lacked gratification, when the emotional, spiritual, and physical connection becomes estranged, there lies your visible discourse. You do not need to be prompted with verbal communication when the nonverbal communication has presented itself most visibly in context. Even if verbal communication is not being had, nonverbal communication will speak in the same way that verbal communication allows itself to be understood. Because you will always have those instances where you can recall a gesture, you can recall a facial expression, you can recall the affliction of tone, you can recall these nonverbal expressions of feelings and emotions. When I was a part of a relationship and I experienced an external shift that prompted an internal shift, there were a lot of context clues that allowed my counterparts to understand what I was going through. Although I wasn't announcing the definitive of what I was experiencing, a lot of their understanding and a lot of my expression was very symptomatic. And as I refer to symptomatic expression, essentially I'm referring to the mood changes, the anxiety, the apathy, the general discontentment or guilt or hopelessness that you may feel when dealing with depression. I'm referring to the behavioral differences, aggravation, excessive crying, irritability, restlessness, social isolation. I was very reclusive when I was dealing with my depression. I recluded deeply within myself, furthermore isolating myself from others. Also, just irregularity with your sleeping pattern, waking up early, sleeping excessively, insomnia, and just the whole entire effect that it takes upon your physical body. Excessive hunger, fatigue, or loss of appetite, and the cognizant lack of concentration. So, for example, say you have a friend that is dealing with depression. They may know that they're dealing with depression and they have not announced it amongst the collective, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe they don't know that they're dealing with depression, but the collective can see the symptomatic signs. That is essentially what I'm referring to when I say definitive and symptomatic. There are some people that will announce the definitive. They know what they're going through and they want to tell others. And there are other people that don't know or do know, but they rather express or they obviously display the symptoms of the definitive. So I say all this to say, I just hate when people, especially friends within relationships, act as if you don't know when your friend is sad. You don't know when your friend is happy. You don't know when your friend is feeling indifferent. Your friendship is dependent upon the independent variable, which is the individuals that consist of this collective, the individuals that make this relationship, that form this partnership. So, for example, the independent variable would be myself. and my three other counterparts. The dependent variable is that relationship. So even if you don't know that I've gone through a shift, or you don't know what's going on with me, you know that something has happened to cause a shift or a change within that relationship, which would obviously lead you back to the source, which would be myself or the other party involved. So that's essentially what the context of this video is referring to. A lot of times, especially when a friend is dealing with depression and you don't have the most supportive friends or the most empathetic friends, I find a lot of times their response, or at least my response, when I announced, what I was experiencing, it was, well, you could have, and you should have, and I would have, but it's like, I didn't need to, you know? And when I did, it was still like, and like, you should have, you could have, you would have, and I did, and you didn't. It's like, okay. Nothing truly happens without forewarning. Everything is by design, may it be humanly intervention or divine planning. The formula of life is constant, yet the independent variable will change. The individuals are independent, and the relationship is dependent. Every failure and success within a relationship is of the contribution of both parties, may it be 50-50 or 20-80. Each individual contributes to the partnership and or collective as the afflicted or the afflictor. No one evades accountability. Not that one is accountable for the other's feelings and its voided grief, yet you are accountable for how you respond. I think it's always about how you respond when dealing with someone that is experiencing depression or that has dealt with depression. When you are in a relationship with someone that has, dealt with a emotional and or psychological disturbance, to say the least, I feel like it's always about how you respond to that person. It's not that you need anyone to resolve your issues. It's not that you need anyone to really aid you in your journey. It's more so understanding and responsiveness. That's about it. And I find that when people resort to saying they did not know, they did not understand, you could have, you should have, you would have, it's really shifting accountability. When in fact, everyone can be accountable for various facets of that relationship, of that experience. We're all accountable for whatever we do in partnerships. If we are the afflicted and or the afflictor, we're accountable. It may not be 50%, it might be 20%. It may not be 50%, it might be 80%. But, we're accountable for what we do and how we respond to what was done. That's the biggest thing. Because when I was in my relationship that I was a part of, and I basically expressed, or rather explained, my symptomatic expressions, when I was explaining the things that I was doing, and I was providing context behind it and how I was feeling throughout that process, it was just like, well, you could have, and you should have, and you would have. So everything that you're saying regarding me, I'm not gonna accept it, because what you did and what you didn't do. And it's just like, so I wanted to make this video just to express how a lot of times people will act as if they don't know what's going on, as if they don't know what the other person is doing, what the other person is saying. They don't know what they are doing or that they have done, when in fact, you know exactly what you're doing. You may not be able to pinpoint the definitive, but you know the symptoms, or the other way around. You may not be able to pinpoint the symptoms, but I feel like if you do know the definitive, then you do understand a bit of the symptomatic expressions. So I just wanted to state that. So basically, I wasn't able to fully articulate my thoughts in the way that I would hope to, so I thought I would come on here and express them a little bit further. Essentially, what bothered me the most from this experience was how you can have someone that is visibly dealing with depression. You can have someone that has not announced unto the group that they are dealing with depression, but they are resembling signs and traits and behaviors that correlate to someone that has dealt with and or is dealing with depression. Like, I literally lost various parts of my identity. Academically, professionally, I was losing major components of myself, to where if you didn't know, it was because you didn't care to know, or because you've chosen to exist within an ignorant state of oblivion to not know, or you lack the empathy to even care enough to seek a conclusive understanding for a probable resolve. You know what I mean? That's where this all comes from. That's where it comes from. Because it's like the integration of our relationship consisted upon the various things that I was losing. So it's like, if you've been with someone for so long, and if your relationship is built upon the very things that they are losing, and you notice a shift within your relational dynamic, and you notice a change within that person, that's where you kind of become a little more inquisitive, and you inquire, like, well, why are you going through this? Why are you doing that? Why are you not doing this? And you know what I mean?